Welcome. This is a January 16th bhyve production user call. We have Andrew, Eva, Jan, Hans, and myself, Michael, so far. And one reminder, the BSCan call for participation is still open. I believe it's till the 12th of February. And sponsors have been kindly rolling in. We have Netflix, Apple, ARM, OpenBSD Amsterdam, and the NetBSD Foundation confirmed so far. I'm very grateful for that. Last year was a nail biter. I reached out to Emil about his virtio-fs work, and he will hopefully join, but we have this narrative update, which is in terms of testing, well, what's your setup? So my question to him was, great, we've got the code. How do we use it? Well, it sounds like you'll need a Linux guest that could support virtio-fs. I don't know if there's overlap in the 9p client code that's arriving in, I believe, 15 in FreeBSD. And he's pretty much hit me with questions that are on the dock there. So if anyone has experimented with virtio-fs in the past, be ready to test that. And I suppose I'll try to bring up the link to his code. I didn't find it in a quick search. And huge news for just about everyone here, OpenZFS 2.3.0 has landed. It has some very, very long-awaited features such as RAID-Z expansion, fast dedupe, direct I/O, JSON output, which from an administrator's perspective is just a godsend. Long name support. It turns out that, for example, even Dan of Freshport's fame has run into snapshot name length issues. And naturally, bug fixes and performance improvements. We discussed that on the ZFS call quite a bit yesterday. I hope to have that recording up shortly. The coverage so far is pretty good in Linux and FreeBSD, and there's a bunch of people nagging Jorgen about updating his Mac OS and Windows support. Any questions, ideas, concerns? And yes, as per chat, virtio-fs 9p and virtio-fs are very different, but from a user's perspective, they are a similar workflow. Okay, so punching through the news before we dive into questions and other fun stuff. I was hoping to try, but then I briefly missed the link for bhyvemgr, a Pascal and Lazarus-based manager for bhyve. I cordially invite you to give this a try. It's 99 point something percent Pascal. It is 3-clause BSD. It is active, and it has a pretty picture. So let me scroll down to that.
It even has a video.
Oh, does it? Oh, well, I don't know if that will work over Zoom, but I will drop the link into chat for those who are going to rock out to that. I didn't scroll that far. They are obviously testing with quite a few OSs, including Haiku. That's cool. Features, scrolling down. DNS mask, okay. Gee, someone has a laptop in a cafe and wants to be productive. VNC X3 RDP, oh, I like that. RDP is definitely something to focus on in all the things. Bridge tap, I hope they get networking right. That's a whole discussion one can follow the call history with. ARM64 support. That's a pleasant surprise. Granted, a lot of it's similar and they're becoming increasingly similar, but there are definitely some nuances on like what firmware you need to load a VM, etc. To
That's
do, go
a
ahead.
note there to see if there's detail on which ARM systems are supported, since some of them that use U-boot versus EFI can have some very different experiences, and also ACPI support too.
In
I've seen that kind of lacking on the ones that say that they have ARM support. There's not always clarification. Like, does this work on the Emperor Ultras, or does it work on like Honeycombs, or does it work on small machines and stuff like that?
Yeah, once you have the right interrupt controller and ARM architecture level, the host has to be set up, but the guest doesn't see the difference anymore, I think.
Wonderful.
That's one of the advantages.
So I've put my discoveries to date in the bhyve wiki page regarding ARM, and I did get it up and running on an aging ThunderX system. I am having unrelated, profound trouble getting any version of FreeBSD to boot on a ThinkPad X13S Snapdragon, and I do have some honeycomb systems within sight shaming me to spin up and try. And those were very, very kindly donated from somebody present, and I thank you for that. You rock. So it looks like this person is rather serious about the project. I am still only about 3/4 down the page, seeing that they are documenting it quite thoroughly. And I will zoom out. PF, okay, they are very much doing their housekeeping. I appreciate that. That's exciting. So yeah, oh, now we're into more pretty pictures, ZFS options. Nice. And there's the video you mentioned. Okay, so I don't know if that will work over Zoom, but I've got the link in the doc, and I welcome all to give it a try. Any questions, discoveries, knowledge about that one? Okay, moving on to very quick ones. I noticed that there has been a LibVirt update, I believe yesterday, and LibVirt and say FreeBSD and Illumos has been a kind of rough and bumpy and tumble and rough and tumble, you name it, pick your metaphor. I did not see any mention of, say, a BSD or true Unix. Let's just do FreeBSD and, oh, okay. From a previous version, mentions of FreeBSD. Okay. From 2020. I do know that TrueNAS Core uses some definition of libvirt under the hood, but one has had to just pretty much lock into a version and a feature set and hope for the best. Are there any libvirt users present?
Oh yeah.
And what host OSs do you use that on?
Linux and FreeBSD.
And could you characterize the FreeBSD experience?
It's not quite as straightforward as on Linux. Linux just goes and runs and does its things as expected, but the documentation for any kind of adjustments on FreeBSD is a bit lacking, and the enablement process is a little bit, well, I wouldn't say it's more involved by any stretch, but it has some, little tricks that sometimes need to be followed, which maybe are less known, I suppose. So I had to go through a couple hoops to, get that all working. And I haven't done as much testing on that as I would like to. So I think probably the best option there would be to take one of the existing R630s that's in the colo and have it set up specifically to test the different options for FreeBSD 15 and 14 using the different versions of libvirt, ports or packages, and just go through all the same steps and see what we can do for gap analysis, and then compare that to Linux and see what the differences are. Because really, it's like documentation's the big one.
Do you recall where you found the tips and tricks to make it work? I recall various blog posts. I suppose I can look for that. But also, do you feel it's a tier one enough technology that there should maybe be a wiki page dedicated to libvirt and FreeBSD or some other form of official-ish documentation?
Yes, I do think it is important enough to have a wiki page for sure. There's a lot of people from the Linux sphere that want to be able to use it, and they kind of expect it to be like a combined thing. Maybe they take it for granted. I don't know. But usually you see people talking about chemo and they wonder where libvirt is, right? Because they're used to that whole workflow. And some of the tips and tricks are just things that I found out and, kind of worked into the picture along the way. So I need to find my notes for it. And,
if you could, that
formalized.
would be quite awesome. And I do see how that might be a barrier for some or a head scratcher. Like, what do you mean you don't have libvirt, even though those of us who, yeah, have been poking at this perhaps before any overlap,
Yeah.
don't don't use it because it wasn't available. So that's just like the bhyve config format. So I do not
And
know
there's a
how.
lot too with the XML
Mhm.
templating on Linux that I think maybe a lot of users don't dig into. I know a lot of people don't like XML for one thing, but
Mhm.
also, usually the interfaces generate all that. But I've been, just knee deep into all of that in the Linux world for many years. And so I can just open up those XML files and cut and paste and, modulate things a little bit if I need to. And so that translates over to FreeBSD to some degree. But since it handles like PCI devices and functions and virtual things and enabling SRIOV differently, there's various aspects that I know how to translate, in my head when I'm
Mhm.
doing those conversions, but they're certainly not documented in any sort of public manner. And then there's going to be version differences, right? Like without getting into specifics, it's going from one major release of QEMU plus LibVirt on Linux and then taking the same version but making the exact same templates work is not always straightforward. Like sometimes it is if it's a super basic one, no
Oh,
worries.
good point.
But you
Okay.
start getting into more like advanced things like bridging, lags uh, in a template versus Linux versus FreeBSD. It's not a cut and paste sort of situation.
Sure.
Yeah. So I would like to have
Um,
the more advanced deployments have templates for Linux for FreeBSD, even for Lumos if that's an option.
yeah, quick
Um,
question, Hans and Andrew. Is there a notion of libvirt on Illumos? I will search their page while I still have it open over here.
I don't know. I don't mess with it much. So
And you're blessed with, say, zones and zone beehive and other nifty things. But let's see, boom, no search, no answer there. Uh, I'm not hoping to create more work for you, Eva, but if you are able to look up your notes, I'm happy to help you untangle them if that's a thing, or find a place in the wiki. So uh, that you are a resident expert, and I thank you for that.
yeah, absolutely. We can add it to the priority list of items to
Perfect.
continue forward with.
Fantastic. And I've done a search of Lumos and OmniOS on libvirt.org, and there are zero results. So no worries. But yeah, it's big, it's a thing. It's not for everyone, but I totally see how those who use it might assume it's everywhere, and we don't want the lack of it to be a barrier to adoption. Moving on, breaking news that doesn't mean much to me yet, but it's from like an hour ago or so, from the 16th. Forgejo 10 has shipped, and that came up in the context of be it GitHub alternatives over the last week or two. So, oh, actually, that conversation came out of a Bugzilla updating conversation. So we discussed all those different tools that can fit in place of, say, Bugzilla and Fabricator, and then there was a clever other name of a Fabricator update slash port sport. So if you are a Forgejo user, 10 is out. So I see a comment about vm-bhyve still not quite giving a proper bridge to users under via documentation or mechanical tools. Uh, that is one that I think, even if it's just documentation, really should get some attention. I think I like the simplicity of the vm-bhyve configuration file. It's simply a
That's
script
not
with
the
some
issue.
parameters. What I'm painting the picture that it's a tool that should broadly get some attention and be tidied up. So Jan, do you want to talk about uh, their bridge
So
configuration insofar? Is it mechanically done or is it documentation or both?
they have set up guidelines and they create the bridge uh, and kind of manage the bridge, but that's hard to do correct because what they're doing is they're just adding the existing physical network interface on the host. For example, EM0 or IX0 or whatever your driver name is, as a member interface to the bridge, while having the IP address as basically all the direct connected routes and so on the member interface instead of on the bridge, which is a straightforward violation of the scoping rules for IP addresses and cannot work correctly and never will. But for IPv4 unicast, it looks like it works for a lot of things until it breaks and won't recover because, those ARP messages are scoped to the wrong interface, namely only the member interface instead of the whole bridge and all its members thereby see the traffic. So yeah, it's just a ticking time bomb. Whenever your cache expires, it won't be repopulated and you will just black hole route stuff.
Yeah.
For IPv6, it will never work because you start with that kind of misscoped traffic. And yeah, the problem is that it's not that easy because what we would have to do is to basically reconfigure or instruct the user to do it, which is the only right way, to move their IP addresses and routes to the bridge interface, then add that, and the bridge already has to exist. So basically, you have to interact with the host configuration. And because they cannot know what the user is expecting out of the system other than running bhyve guests, there is no one correct way to do it. There are multiple ways to do it. Some of them are correct. What they're doing is definitely always wrong. And yeah, you have to kind of basically no member interfaces of a FreeBSD bridge must have an IP address. Only the bridge itself is allowed to have the IP addresses. Otherwise, you're just not ending up with correctly scoped IP link definitions, because then what an IP is supposed to happen is that the bridge is one link. VLAN or segment, call it whatever your terminology fits for that. And then the problem is that if you put the IP address under, the network stack will just think, oh yeah, I'm multicasting, but now you're only sending out on the physical interface, for example. If you're trying to ping the broadcast IPv4 address on your physical member interface with an IP address, which should have one, the broadcasts will never go over the bridge.
So,
because the host just assumes that, yeah, okay, this is an interface. It has a broadcast address sent to this interface, but it will not move up into the stack to the bridge.
correct.
And then,
speaking from firsthand experience, this is a symptom of the fact that one would try bhyve years ago or add bhyve, but not figure a host for virtualization. And here we are.
In my opinion, it's a consequence of them wanting to make it easy and safe for the host system so that you don't lock yourself out of SSH access to modify your existing system. So they want it to be just a modular component, but it cannot be that without having a kind of high-level management API for the FreeBSD network stack, which definitely doesn't exist.
Well, I hear, if anything, a documentation challenge. The project has received a recent update. I know folks like Antonig are involved in it. So if you've got a documentation diff, feel free to propose that. Otherwise, let's put our heads together in the coming weeks to get that accurate. So quick important comment here. Okay, so there's a to-do list item for a few folks. Dan, welcome, Craytonian. Any topics, questions, issues to bring up? And Dan, you got a small call out for the OpenZFS name length issue having hit limitations with snapshot names. Thank you for joining yesterday's call.
No worries. I still can't find any of the original problems, but I remember hitting them. It was years, nothing within the past 3 to 5 years, I'm sure. It was much longer ago.
Okay. One could simply hit the command line, start creating a snapshot, and bring, say, a cat over to type on the keyboard and give you a really long name and see if it fails. So
you have a
don't know
cat
where the
there,
cat
don't
went.
you? You have a cat.
Yeah, I know. I don't see the cat.
Come on, try it. Try it. We're waiting.
Okay, no worries. Craytonian, any questions, ideas, concerns, funny jokes? And while I have Dan and Craytonian joining us, we took a look at this bhyve manager, Lazarus and Pascal-based manager, and LibVirt. If either of you have tinkered with LibVirt, there has been an update, and we'd like to get, say, FreeBSD in line with it. Apparently, there's no Illumos or OmniOS support. Not that those are one and the same, but this is that bhyve manager. It has a pretty video we haven't tried playing over Zoom. And here's a link to that, but let's give it a try. It is active. It has seen updates within the last, I don't know, 2 weeks. And let's see, they've been very thorough on documentation. So it's pages upon pages of details, housekeeping, you name it. So that's what we've been covering for those who just rolled in. The Tuesday meeting dedicated to mail hosting was quite popular. It's in the standard feed on YouTube at Call for Testing. I am not against having the periodic call focusing on something special like that, be it dtrace, be it insert topic here. So I'm all ears for topics where people feel they're a slightly orthogonal but often overlapping, because of course you're running your mail server in a zone or jail, logically, and in some cases you're forced to a VM because it's maybe some appliance from asterisk vendor. So that said, are there any requests here for topics that we should cover? Okay, it sounds like Craytonian, you've got some questions about what do you mean multi-overt devices? Go ahead and join in if your mic's working. Or reach out in the various social media challenges, the Discord, you name it. VBA, So you can have the floor if your mic is working, else take it to social media channels or your chat of choice. I'm going to look up next week's date, which is the 23rd. Ooh, this year is flying by, isn't it? 23rd. So, mic's not working. No worries. Other topics, questions, ideas, and requests for the year now that we're just baby steps into 2025. Don't all leap ahead at once. I believe it's 1830 something UTC. I've got an office move later today, so I'm happy to call it, but I do want you to make the most of this time. And no, I can't find the cat for a snapshot name length test, but I'll try to give that a try. Going once, going twice. And if someone wants the honors, I invite you to go for it. And I can stick around a few minutes afterwards if you have unofficial topics. Your call, not mine. Well, like and subscribe, everyone. Have a fantastic weekend. Catch you next week, and take care.